Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. With this video, I'll be reviewing Beastlands Maelstrom of Monsters, designed by Todd Otto for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. A review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you enjoy my videos, consider supporting me via patreon.com/roguewatson. Shout out to my platinum patrons, Andrew, Richard, Joe, Will, Tiny Dancer, Nick, and Rivzung. And gold patrons, RPG Papercrafts, Charming Grenade, Pretty Boy Numa, Marcos de Vicente, Gilberto, Sean, A.K., Cert2B, Adam, Dead Lizard Lounge, and Sam. Thank you all very much for your support. And no, I did not flub the intro. I mean, I usually flub the intro, but this is not on the DM's Guild nor Drive-Thru RPG or any of those. This is a its own website called Beastlands.com, and the idea here is this is a procedurally generated monster manual. Now, for those of you that do not have a video gaming background, and specifically a certain kind of video game, usually a Diablo-style action RPG, some roguelike games, procedurally generated means content that is randomly generated with a little more intelligence involved, in theory. Usually using more like parameters and things, so it's not completely randomly generated. So for example, in like a Diablo game or a roguelike, it would be randomly generated dungeons, as well as like which monsters appear in those dungeons and what kind of loot and stuff. You know, it creates a huge amount of replayability for what is essentially the same game. That is not something I feel like we need in a tabletop RPG, because although we are technically playing the same game, that game obviously can contain a multitude of any kind of content, because it's a game. It's more of a rule system than it is a game, really. I'm of course talking about Dungeons and Dragons or any tabletop RPG. So you don't, and the idea behind it is you are using material crafted from a dungeon master or from a publisher that the DM is then using, or GM, to create this content, instead of having the game itself create the content based on a bunch of algorithms and parameters and generators. So I'm not sure this is something we needed to begin with. It's an interesting idea. You know, I come from a gaming background and I understand what this provides, which is it's a bunch of monsters that are completely randomly generated. And if you're wondering how that works, I'm going to show you. But my quick review is that it does not work. It basically just doesn't work well. Right down to the descriptions are all just kind of Mad Libs. You can tell it's just inserts. You know, it's got a description of something, and it'll just insert that terrain or the monster type or whatever else in its description. There are no physical descriptions and no artwork whatsoever, and I'm not even sure how you would do it, because although this is a published PDF, by published I mean it's a PDF you can get, each one is literally randomly generated. So when you buy it, it generates those monsters for you. Now that's an interesting concept, but you literally don't even know what you're going to get. It's almost a weird form of gambling. And I can confirm this because they sent a Google Drive link with 5 different versions of this same PDF, and all of them were completely different in terms of what monsters were in there, what the names were, what the abilities were, everything. So it just literally randomly generates it for the PDF. It's not like they just took like the best versions or something. It is, no, this is straight up what this book is. And it is bizarre. It's very strange. Even the names are just kind of gobbledygook, just randomness. The balance level is all over the place. Some things seemed a lot weaker than they should have been. A lot seemed a way stronger than they should have been. The one advantage is it does offer a ton of monsters. Almost 300 monsters are included here, spread out over each type of monster. So celestials, fays, fiends, undead, beasts, all that. And then all different CR ratings, all the way from CR 1/8, I think is the lowest, all the way up to CR, I guess, I don't know what the highest one is, probably 25 or something, whatever is used in 5th edition. That's fine, but unfortunately, if none of them are particularly good, it doesn't really matter how many you've got on the one hand. So I'm going to go through kind of briefly. Obviously, I'm not going to go through 300 different monster entries, but I'm going to give you an example of why this really doesn't work and kind of what I would have liked to see if you're going to use that kind of Diablo or roguelike concept of making randomly generated monsters. So let's go to an example. And this is, by the way, the author mentions it's kind of an early access book. It's still in progress, but they did give it to me for review purposes, so I am reviewing it like it's a final product. But because of the nature of this, and that's obviously very true of video games, it's just current. It's always ongoing, so they can make tweaks and things. But if this is something you can purchase now, which it is, then I'm going to review it based on that. So, for example, there's one thing that's not even touched on, as far as I'm aware, in this actual book, which is the life force here. So all the monsters have a life force that says it's what the creature's weave is made of. Planned crafting system. I hope that's not supposed to be planned crafting system. There's no explanation on what that is or what it amounts to, so I'm not sure if that's just part of something that's coming later or what. Who knows? But this is what the current what each monster entry is going to look like. It is slightly different looking than the traditional monster stat block. It's close enough, and not you don't have to exactly copy and paste what the monster manual does and what WotC does for their official stuff, but most monster supplements tend to use the same 5th edition, the exact same looking stat block, and this one is very similar. The font and stuff's a little small, which kind of bugs me. Otherwise, it just gives a bunch of actions after that, spells, and then if they have any abilities. And you can see by the, I don't know if you can see too well, the zoom level I've got for each individual monster name, but it is just pure gibberish. It is pure gibberish. Let's go to one example I've got written down, which is the Ambiostly. So, I mean, I'm just real quick on these names. Refliarstly, Refly, Tartliosly. I mean, it's just literally randomly algorithm I didn't even pronounce that. Smioxiastly. These are not real names. These are just complete random generated gibberish. The Ambiostly has the lust description, which means it can be hard not to stare at Ambiostly. They always seem so enticing and attractive, only until they get what they want. They will go great lengths to seduce and entice other creatures, always finding something useful to take from them. After they achieve their goal, they usually discard that relationship and find something else to obtain. These are very vague, purposely vague generic descriptions because they need to be applied to multiple creatures. Nowhere in there was there any kind of physical description of this creature. The only thing it has is the glowing life force, which is that its blood glows and gives off water energy. 30 feet around the creature gives off enough light to make a dark room dim. Okay? But there's, again, no description of this creature at all. Oh, I look at the description and say it's got 40 feet speed and a fly of 80 feet. So apparently it's got giant wings or something. No information about that whatsoever. It's bizarre. And then this is a CR 23 creature, which makes it one of the most powerful creatures in the universe, according to D&D lore. Again, you can play in whatever universe you want. It has an armor class of 12 for a CR 23 creature. It does have several hundreds of hit points, but bizarre is what I would say. Makes 3 attacks. It's got a plus 10 to hit. All that seems fine, but the low armor class is extremely strange. We're going to bounce down to another creature just because I had a really funny... And I don't really want to just troll or crap on this thing because I think there are some good ideas in here, but it's hard not to just bust out laughing with some of these obviously placeholder Mad Lib style descriptions. So for the Sextiar Tyrannial, as the mountain nomad, these drifters are known to travel from place to place, usually never setting roots for too long. Sextiar Tyrannial lives to see everything mountain has to offer. Since they are always moving, they have become very adept at traveling inside of mountain, letting them ignore difficult terrain while traveling in it. So obviously the algorithm just has this description and then just replaces the terrain type by, probably a table of 10, and it just reads really stupidly. It sounds stupid. You can see through the algorithms so clearly. It just doesn't create a compelling creature whatsoever. It's got a foe of Ambiostly. Happens to be the other creature I highlighted. These creatures harbor a deep hatred for Ambiostly, either through sheer hatred or victims of circumstance. Sextiartial takes anything that is related to Ambiostly and tries to tear them apart if they get a chance. Usually obsessed with finding Ambiostly and extinguishing them, one thing is for sure, they always have a sign of relief after dealing with something from Ambiostly. It's funny, but it's not, because it's really not good content. This is just complete randomly generated stuff. The one interesting idea that was the purpose behind this was that so players can't metagame your foes. They have no idea what they're up against. These things are literally just randomly generated Frankenstein's monster-style creatures that can have whatever kind of abilities that this thing pulls from to create. So your players will have literally no idea. Unfortunately, as the DM, you have no freaking idea either. You have no idea what this creature looks like. There's no artwork in this book whatsoever. There's no physical descriptions, and the balance level seems kind of nuts. And I get that that's a very difficult thing to do in D&D, given that the monster manual isn't even consistent balance-wise with the actual, like, here's how to create a monster with the DM, with the Dungeon Master's guide monster generator thing. Like, those aren't even consistent. So it's hard to create that, but I can just take a glance at things and say, like, okay, this does not seem right. This is nuts. There are a few interesting abilities that are found in here. So to put kind of a positive spin on this, I did like to see some original ideas. It doesn't just pull ideas from existing traits from the Dungeon Master's Guide, because that's what it says to do when creating your own monsters. Like, hey, here's a bunch of traits we use for the Monster Manual. Just use those for your custom monsters, which is a fine idea. This one does offer a few interesting ideas that I haven't seen before, that I'd be like, okay, this is kind of a cool trait that I could apply to maybe a monster that I want to make. For example, the Bone Lance, the Texio Arcanaut, whatever. Springs forward up to 5 feet and deals 3d10 piercing damage. The target has to make a dex saving throw, or they become restrained as part of the extending bone breaks off and sticks to the surface. You're literally impaling somebody. You're like shooting out a piece of yourself with the Bone Lance, which just is really cool sounding. That's a neat description. That's a neat ability. I could say, okay, I could see if I was making some kind of creature, I could apply that to this creature. That's a neat ability. So I like that there are a few original ideas here. Let's see, one of my wrote down was Flesh Morph Beam. You can see I've even tried to just come up with random words. The idea is it's a Polymorph Attack. First of all, this is absolutely bananas. It does 64d6 necrotic damage. This is a CR23. DC 22 Wisdom saving throw, or they become stunned, and you transform into a fleshy mound that has 224 hit points. And the reason that's crazy is because the only way to really cure Polymorph, other than if it's a concentration spell, is to reduce the hit points down to 0, which is an interesting idea. I mean, it's bananas here, but the idea is something that polymorphs you into something that is not as good as your form. In this case, you literally become a fleshy ball. I would put it a little more interesting, like you were a rabbit or something. That way the player can come up with something clever. That's given a ton of hit points to where you have to stay in this form for a long time, but maybe you try to like suicide yourself and distract the enemy or something, because you need to take that damage in order to revert back to your regular form. So that's kind of an interesting idea that got me thinking, is using polymorph as something enemies can do, because normally players can, if an enemy polymorphs one of your party members, the easiest thing to do is just turn around and stab that party member with your attack, especially if you get turned into a rabbit or something, and then you'll take that little bit of damage and then get back to your regular form. So this way, if you polymorph into something that's crappy but has a lot of hit points, that creates an interesting spin on the use of polymorph from the DM side. So that's kind of an interesting idea, even though it's kind of nuts here. Speaking of nuts, the Tarot Crowtruct has the Berserk trait, which means, first of all, AC 19, hit points 416. Okay, he's a CR23, he's a big boy. Or girl, or I don't know what this thing is. I have no idea what this thing is. It's truly marvelous. Creature has gemstones growing all over its body. 1d8 gemstones worth 2,300 gold pieces. Outrageous! Is literally what the text says. So the crazy part is, after it goes below 115 hit points for the first time, it restores 144 hit points, and for the next minute deals 31d6 damage during the first attack of each turn. It berserks and attacks the closest target within reach. If more than one target is within reach, roll a percentile for the target to attack. Just automatically does an insane amount of damage. If I was fighting a creature in a video game and it got to 1/4 health and then regained half its health and then all of a sudden just did one attack and just destroyed me in one hit, I would be throwing my controller down. Like, that's terribly frustrating and horrible. Again, the balance level just all over the place. That seems way overpowered. The other monsters seemed underpowered. The Ambiosely, just if you're gonna do this with randomly generated monsters, like step one needs to be they need to be properly balanced. Because if you're not properly balanced, then what the hell are we even doing here? And this is a funny example of how the algorithm only has so many things it can reuse. I found this one literally on the same 2-page spread. Bull's Guidance. Persistence is key. Pentiargon will never give up, even when times look tough. They will go through any means necessary to get the job done, blah, blah, blah. Miniagon also has Bull's Guidance. Persistence is key. Miniagon will never give up, even when times look tough. You know, it's the exact same description, just replaced with the name of the creature. I just don't think this idea works. First of all, I don't think we need this in D&D at all. I think it's fine in video games when you're just replaying the same content and you need that stuff to create replayability, but in a D&D setting, I would much rather have cool, custom crafted, scripted monsters that are interesting, they have neat abilities and ideas and descriptions and lore, and be able to fight a few of those creatures and then use a bunch of minions beyond that, rather than get this insane hodgepodge of even when you're fighting like a Diablo-style game, it's not like you're fighting completely just random Frankenstein monsters of random bits. You're fighting because even video games are limited to certain models, so they'll have certain models and animation rigs and everything. So you might be fighting, a zombie model, and it's just been given different traits, and that's what I wish this had done: is take monsters and just give them different traits, and that way you add a ton of replayability and you can help fight back against that metagaming with somebody that's I know what zombies are capable of. Say that these zombies have a pulsing green mist around them, so they're constantly doing poison damage to everyone around them, or this zombie has its arm replaced by I don't know, a giant club or something, and that gives it another attack. Or it's got a third arm sewn on it, or something. I don't know. Or this zombie crawls on the ground but can burrow through the earth and pop up. So you're using the same basic creature base, but you're giving it additional abilities and traits, which then can make it interesting and add that replayability, and you get more use out of the monsters. Like take a gnoll and give me a gnoll rogue with roguish abilities, a gnoll archer, a gnoll sorcerer. Or mutate gnolls. Give me a gnoll with like 2 heads that's got multi-attack or something, and you can suddenly create a dozen different stat blocks based on that, which is what you can do in the Dungeon Master's Guide. You can make your own, but if I don't want to do that and I just want to have better ideas, or something that's got that already put together that's well balanced, give me some decent artwork there, maybe some lore behind that stuff, that would be a really cool monster manual that I could get a lot of mileage out of. This is kind of just a disaster of randomly generated creatures that I see no reason to use at all. I could pull a few ideas out of this based on some of the traits involved here, but this is honestly something that you could just get from... I feel like this would be better served for a website. Let me, click on a certain parameter. It says I need this CR level, I need this type of enemy, and then I can select a few parameters if I want. I need it to be a flyer or something, and then click a button and then generate something like this in a website, and you can support that with ads or whatever, instead of creating this weird published PDF that has a bunch of just absolute Mad Libs monsters on it, which is just the strangest thing that I don't think fits for Dungeons and Dragons. Let's go over my pros and cons for Beastlands Maelstrom of Monsters. Pros, quantity, you've got it here. 285 monsters spread out over 15 types and 26 different challenge ratings. A lot of monster supplements. They're limited in their quantity. This one is not because of the system. Unfortunately, my caveat of that is if they're all generally crappy, then the quantity really doesn't matter. But in this case, I will at least give it that and say pro. It's got a lot of monsters in it. The other pro is what I highlighted, that there are some interesting abilities. Ones that I didn't go over, for example. So I mentioned like Bone Lance and Flesh Morph Beam. There was one called Mind Sap, which is a psychic attack that then, if the players fail a saving throw, Every time they cast a spell after that, they take psychic damage, and they can no longer concentrate on spells for the next like minute or something, which is a really interesting effect that gives players, they still have the save to try and resist it, but then it affects them from then on. They don't get to repeat the save. And again, spellcasters, that can be really interesting. It's like, well, do I cast a spell and do I know I take the damage, or do I not cast a spell? That's an interesting effect. Again, an interesting idea that I can then pull onto my own custom creations because I would not use these. Death Burst was another one I wrote down, which I think Mephits have this, where they can explode and create different effects, but this is just if monsters explode and deal damage, which is not something you see very often in the monster manual or a lot of things, even though that's the one thing you can always guarantee that will happen to your monsters is they will die. So one of the things you can do is have them do something upon death that will make your players create some really interesting situations where they have to maybe push monsters away or do something to not take that death burst damage. So there are some good ideas in here that I liked seeing, but I would have liked to see those more of like, here are traits you can apply to existing monsters, rather than here are some just bananas randomly generated nonsense monsters that just have all these random traits plugged in. Cons: procedural generation results in hilariously generic monsters with a mishmash of traits and abilities and Mad Libs descriptions. Just doesn't work. Cons: the balance is all over the place. Weirdly enough, I thought that by plugging into, making sure those algorithms are correct and all the different parameters and things, we could at least create monsters that scaled properly. Now, granted, that's one of the hardest things for me to do as a reviewer who's just reading this, is trying to determine where the balance level is, because I'm not sitting here playing these monsters out or playtesting. That's even a bigger disaster. Is how do you even playtest this? You can't. It's just they're randomly generated monsters. All you can do is try to follow the parameters set in the Dungeon Master's Guide and whatever the designer is using to try to make it work. It didn't seem like at my first glance that was working at all. No creature above like CR 20 something should have an AC of 12, for example. And that one where they like heal up half their health and then do, all like a player's worth of damage as a bonus damage on top of everything else they do, that doesn't seem like it fits at all. So just at a glance, it doesn't feel like it's well balanced in either direction. And con: there's no artwork whatsoever. There's no artwork for any of the monsters and no physical descriptions at all, because again, just complete randomly generated, so it doesn't know what these physical descriptions are going to be. Final verdict: Beastlands Maelstrom of Monsters proves that procedurally generated content always pales in comparison to custom handcrafted creations. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can support my work at patreon.com/roguewatson. You can follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel. Thank you.